Good afternoon, everybody. It's Interviewing Wednesday. We're very glad you're with us. It's July 29th. Hard to believe another month is almost over. We're very glad that you are with us. For those people who are on Zoom, please, if you will, please enter your questions into the chat box. That way, as Mark is giving his presentation, if you think of something, you can ask it right away. For those people who are on Facebook, please just enter your questions into the comment box. I am monitoring that, so I'll be able to get those questions asked as Mark is ready for you. For those people on Zoom, just as a reminder, there's a couple different ways you can view things by clicking on view options where the blue arrow is. Then you can select speaker view. Speaker view is what's on the lower left-hand corner. It's what we sort of ask you, we prefer for you to use. That way you see the speaker and the presentation that he's giving, and right in between the speaker where that red arrow is pointing, there's a couple little white lines. You can grab that with your mouse and you can pull that back and forth so you can make the speaker bigger and smaller, whatever works for a combination of the size of the presentation and the size of the speaker. Please note that this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career FW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channels for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, and if you post a comment in the chat box or have your microphone or camera on, you give consent for your name, picture, and comments to appear. Well, good afternoon again. My name is Jeff Morris. I founded Career FW back in 2008 to help the unemployed in the DFW area. In 2012, I created CareerUSA.org after a visit to the White House and finding out that there really was nothing else like this around the United States. I facilitate and lead the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. I've been doing that since 2007, and I've been a member of the practice interview team since 2017. Well, our speaker today is Mark McDonald. He leads the practice interview team. His topic today is going to be how to be a confident candidate, lessons from the pit crew. So Mark, thank you for being with us. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jeff, for that introduction. I'm grateful for the time to be here, and I'm going to take a minute here and share my screen, make sure everybody can see, and also that I've got the chat screen available, so let me do that. Okay, you should be able to see that as full screen. You do? All right, yes. Very good. Let me get the chat window up. All right, so I'll be taking a look at the chat window as we go, but you know, if a lot of questions pop up, they may scroll off my screen, so I'm going to ask Jeff to keep an eye out for that, and we'll get to your questions. And let me back up. Here we go. So a little bit about myself. I spent about 30 years, a little bit more, in the Dallas area working in the telecommunications equipment space. So that's electronics that the phone companies would use to provide service to your home or to your business. And it was really very successful area to be up until the early 2000s. And then there was a recession in 2001, 2002, and you might remember MCI and WorldCom had some problems, and so that changed that market forever. And between 2002 and 2012, I got laid off 3 times. And not only did I got laid off, as in 2 of those 3 cases, I had teams, 50, 60 people, and the entire team got laid off as well. So these were truly restructurings. And so I've been in your shoes, and I come to the work I do for the pit crew with some pretty high confidence that you're going to land. And so that's what happened to my teams. You know, not right away, but just about everybody. I can only think of one exception. Found another job, and I found another good job. So after, you know, I'd had to lay them off. I got involved in the pit crew in 2013, and then early 2014, I assumed the leadership of the pit crew, and I've been doing that ever since. So we're going to talk today about becoming a confident candidate. So this presentation started off after I'd been doing it about a year. I said, well, lessons from the pit crew, and And I talk mainly about mistakes that people made, frankly. And maybe not so much mistakes, but things that weren't really very effective. Then it hit upon me that, that's not really what I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about all the errors that people make. I want, people to come through the pit crew to be more confident, to be as confident as they can be, that they can tell their story well. So that's what we pursue at the pit crew. And now we're virtual. We used to meet face to face, and I hope we get back to meeting face to face soon. But being virtual is very effective for what we do, which is we offer a safe and supportive environment where you can practice your interview skills, and you can do that as many times as you like. I think the record is 9, it might be 8. Several people have done 3 or 4. Just come as many times as you like and practice. Like you spend time polishing your resume, you need to spend time polishing your practice skills as well. So we provide an environment to do that. One of the keys to the pit crew is that and it's free, it's all volunteers. And all the interviewers, we call them panelists, are hiring managers. So as part of their professional responsibility, they've hired people. And so they do the best job of interviewing you. They do the best job of giving you feedback at the end. And you can be confident when you come to the pit crew that, real hiring managers are providing the interviews. So as I mentioned, the pit crew's goal is to build your confidence as you can tell your story well in any interview situation. So I want to warm up the chat box here and get your perspective, from your perspective, what does being a confident candidate mean? You can just type in something briefly, 1 or 2 things. Let's give it a go and see if it's going to work for us. Maybe not. There we go. Knowing who you are and what you want to do. Thanks, Jennifer. Not seeming too anxious. Very good. Able to articulate your responses. Great communicator. Doing your homework. Comfortable telling your story and how you can solve organizations' problems. That's a good one. Confident and being truthful. Yes. Performing your best. Not wavering in your answers. Knowing who can add value. Being confident means being able to speak truthfully about your experience in a comfortable manner. I missed one here. Logical answering without pauses. Balanced, authentic. Know your strengths. All right, very good. Got a lot of responses there. So let me tell you what I think it is. And number 1, you have a voice for every question. So we want to get you to the point where there's really no question that can stump you. And if you don't know the answer, you know how to still answer the question, perhaps with a slightly different response, right? So that's a voice for every question. You converse. We're big on conversation instead of interrogation. And you ask questions and you express your perspective. So an interview is best if it's more of a conversation, and a conversation has a give and take, a plus and minus, your perspective and my perspective. So that's what once you've gained that confidence, you'll feel perfectly at ease asking questions of the interviewer, perhaps bringing up topics that they haven't covered that you would like to talk about. So that's part of being a confident candidate. You make effective choices. So there's lots of choices to be made in an interview, how you're going to deal with a particular style of interviewer, what the interviewer's background is, if you know that, if they're in marketing or sales or operations or engineering. So you make effective choices and you know what those choices are. You have some idea what those choices are. After you've practiced enough or even had real life interviews enough, you will start to realize that you can anticipate what the interviewer is going to ask you based on what they do and what the job description says. So that's a key part of being able to do some of the more desirable things in an interview, is be less concerned about the basics and more concerned about the nuances. And so once you get enough confidence, that's what you will focus on. Things like building rapport and showing enthusiasm. And you come to realize that your job search is not a random walk, okay, where you wait on the phone or apply online and hope or expect that fate is going to deliver you a new job. You are responsible for finding your next job. And so you set about doing that with purpose. So, and we're going to take a step in that direction today with this presentation. Now, this presentation was, like I said, started putting it together about 5 years ago. Now we, every week, and starting next week, we have 13 sessions where we go into the things I'm going to talk about in great detail. So this is one presentation that covers about 8 of the 13 sessions that we're going to have between now and the end of October, starting next week and then the end of October. And I think Jeff may talk about that at the end. So it's pretty condensed, and but it's comprehensive, and so that's the nice thing. You can see how the structure flows and what we teach and how it works and how it fits together. But you know, you have to use what you believe will work for your situation. And so here's some resources that I'm going to be referring to in the presentation. How to answer the 64 toughest interview questions. Okay, we're not going to talk a lot about tough questions, but we have a whole session on it in the 13 sessions. But it's a good resource. I encourage you to read it. It's got a lot of good ideas in there. Jay Fisaro's book, and he presents as well. He spoke a few weeks ago at Jeff's meeting, and he's got some great ideas. I think they're very successful and effective ways to, and I'll mention those as well when I come to it. I want to give credit. Jay Arbetter, networking is his specialty. He spoke just last week. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Last week, yeah. So there's lots of different resource material for you, and Jeff has his tip of the week, which has some good ideas in it as well. But ultimately, you're going to have to pick the ones that you believe will work best in your situation. And coaches can be a help here as well. So if you want to engage a coach, they, like Walt, who's on the line here, and Carol Brickell's another one that's in the pit crew, and also Jack Bick. They'll help you sort out what are the best and most effective strategies for you to use based on your background and what you're going for and things like that. So you can get some help it's not all trial and error. You can get some help to sort out what things will work best for your situation. Like you probably realized in your resumes, there's a lot of opinions, and but I would say there's not so many different opinions about interviewing, but there are just lots of options. Okay, here's what we're going to talk about today. I've got 5 kind of agenda topics, and the pit crew, when I joined in 2014 and decided to get some business cards, we also decided we need a brand. And some people wanted to do, the fire pit, the pit bull. But what we settled upon was the pit crew, the practice interview team, pit crew, double entendre. And so we're the group that helps the race car driver win the race. And so we use the race car theme in this presentation. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is preparing for the race, and then how to get a good start, how to avoid crashing, and this is where the mistakes come up. Now it's just one section. How to finish strong, and the post-race activities. Now I've also got a couple of bonus pieces in here, which is taking the lead, so how to set yourself apart, showing enthusiasm, building rapport. So that'll be in there as well. And so just some of the topics we'll cover. There we go. Your statement of enthusiasm and how to use it. The tell me about yourself question, how to answer that. Star stories. And so star stories, we'll talk about what they are, but if you're asked a behavioral or situational question, taking appropriate credit. This is a common misconception people use to answer their star stories. You need to take credit for what you did. And so you need to use those I words and my words versus we. Speaking too much or too little. So how much is too much? You know, how much time do you take answering a question? Redirecting a negative question into a positive response. And you often get negative questions in your interviews. Tell me about a time that you failed. What's the biggest mistake you made? And we'll cover some other confidence building topics, like I just mentioned, how to set yourself apart from other candidates and demonstrating enthusiasm. So let's dig into it. Okay, in the 13-week sessions we spend 5 weeks on getting prepared, and that includes a session on video interviewing. So getting prepared is a big topic. We're going to start next week, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But I would say that when new people come to the pit crew, new people being people who just got laid off, they're somewhat overwhelmed with all the things they need to do to get prepared to look for a job. And being prepared to interview is one of those big things that you need to do. So it's key to being confident. When you have a specific interview that you're in line for, you're going to have a job description to work with. So you're going to use that job description to develop your interview specific stories. And this takes a little bit of discernment. We have a whole session, and when I say we, I'm talking about Walt Glass and myself, so that's not clear. Walt Glass and I, every week, for 13 weeks, we cover these topics that I'm mentioning. But some, job descriptions are very spotty. Let's say there's a lot of variation in their quality. Okay, and so you can't just rely on a single job description. So if I leave you with anything, I want you to understand that you should do research on job descriptions. So if you want to be a business analyst and you've decided that there's 10 companies that you'd really like to work for, you need to look at all the job descriptions that you can find that have to do with business analysts, and even in other industries, right? Because you want to understand in detail what companies are looking for at this moment in a business analyst. And when you get a specific job description from one of your target companies, or you get contacted by a recruiter, they're going to have one, and it may have some of those things and it may not. Okay, but you're spreading your perspective a little bit wider than any particular one company. So and that will help you discerning and what's really most important. And we're going to talk about in a minute. You're going to ask a question right after you make your opening statement about what's important to that interviewer relative to the job you're interviewing for. But initially, it's all going to be based on your research. So look for themes. I just mentioned, look at other job descriptions and use informational interviews when you're networking to gain insight on what companies are looking for and what your target companies are looking for specifically. So that's important. You're going to develop star stories, situation, task, action, and result specifically for that job description. Okay, I recommend 5. If you have more, that's better. And as you go through the interview process and you go to the second round and third round and fourth round, you're going to want to come up with more star stories as you learn what they're looking for, more stories that tell what you've achieved that's relevant to what they're looking for. But initially, I would say have 5 based on that job description. And these are stories that indicate you've achieved things in the past that solved their problems. Okay. And we'll talk about star stories a little bit more. You want to tell those, each star story is pretty short. And this takes a lot of discipline and frankly, a lot of practice to tell most star stories in 90 seconds or less. So think of it this way. You want to get to the result. You want to get to the punchline. You want to get to the benefit, the value that you provide, the achievement that you had within 90 seconds. Okay. So It's very crisp. You only want to mention the important details, but you do want to mention details, but only the important ones. And so when I started doing this for myself, I found it very hard to get it into 90 seconds because I really wanted to spend a lot of time with the setup. But the setup should be very brief. And the idea here is that you get to that result. If you hit upon something they're interested in, they will want to know more, and they will ask another follow-up question, and then you'll get time to provide more details. So situation very brief. It might be just your title, where you were working, your title, or and perhaps, you know, I was at ABC Corp. It was my second year there. You know, I was a senior project manager. And then the task, what was the task? The action you took, and then the achievement, the result, okay? And if you type this out on a word processor, that's gonna be about 200 words. It's only 90 seconds, okay? And now, why 90 seconds? Because you need to tell the whole story. And as a matter of fact, if you can tell it in less than 90 seconds, go for it, right? So here's a common misconception. I'll just cover it now. It may come up later as well, but it's a common misconception that giving a comprehensive answer is the best way to answer a question. But that is not true at all. Giving a brief answer that goes right to the point is the best way to demonstrate your ability. And, you know, comprehensive answer may take 5 minutes, okay? So you may have missed the opportunity to answer 2 other questions, okay, because you gave a very comprehensive answer when all you needed to do was to give a very directed answer. So that's kind of the theory and the practice. So these star stories that you're going to prepare specifically based on the job description are focused on their needs. And so that means you need to understand what they need help with, okay? And that's what the job description is for. And there's other structured ways to answer questions, answer behavioral interview questions. RATS is one where you reverse the order of the story. So you tell the result first, and then the action, and then the task, and then the situation. PAR is like problem, action, result. RAW is another reverse message. The result first, and the action, and then why, and so on and so forth. So there's different kinds, and you'll hear people speak on these in the networking groups. Rick Wagner talks about cars. I like cars. You know. Okay, and the most effective star stories are going to be how you're what you did in the past, the achievements you've achieved, match their type of problem. So you need to know what their problem is, and you get that from the job description and the research you've done, and looking at other job descriptions, and having informational interviews. So you build your repertoire of what you know the industry needs, and that will set you up for having a conversation. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, it's important that you prepare questions that you want to ask. Okay, so I mentioned that one of your goals in your interview is to have a conversation and not just an interrogation. So prepare the questions that you want to ask. Suggest that, oh, yeah, here's some examples. And I have a whole document. At the end, I'm going to give you a document. It wasn't on the list on the second slide there, second or third slide, but it's 200 questions that you may want to ask. It's got to give Walt credit for that. He found it. It's a really good, it's 200 questions you might want to ask, and they're all by topic. So you can go through and take a look at those and see which ones look good to you. Here's some of the initial questions that, one of the first questions you should ask, what was it about my background that interests you the most? And by the way, this one works really well with recruiters when they call you up and they say, I have this job, senior project manager, what are your salary requirements? You can say, well, what was it about my background that interests you the most? And see what they say. I had a very disappointing interview one time. Guy called me up, did just that. And I said, well, what was it about my background that interests you the most? And he said, well, I did a keyword search, and he told me the keywords, and you came up 17th on the list. That's all he knew about me. He was just going through a list, calling people. So I was kind of disappointed in that, but that, you know, that's the kind of thing you'll hear, or they'll give you a very specific answer why they were interested in talking about you, and that's, you know, a key. That's what you're going to want to talk about with the recruiter. Now, in interview situations, you might ask right up front, what are the characteristics of top performers in this position? Okay, and if you want to personalize it a bit to help build rapport, you say, what are the characteristics from your perspective of top performers in this position? So that's a more of a personalized question. If you're talking to the hiring manager, you can say, what are the characteristics of your top performers in this position? And, you know, what are the most important priorities to this position? So that's another way to ask one of your first questions. But you want to prepare, you want to have about 10 questions prepared in advance. And so let me just say, and give credit to Jack Beck for this, because he taught me this, is that there's prepared questions, there's reaction questions when you get in an interview and they say something and you know, a question popped in your head, so you're reacting to something they've said or something they've asked you. And then there's the what about questions. And what about questions are something that you believe might be interesting to them, but they haven't mentioned it yet. So you might say, you know, what about using Agile to increase your forecasting effectiveness? Have you ever done that? There you go. It's a leading question. They may say yes or no, or they may say that's very interesting, and they may say, why do you ask? And that's exactly what you want to hear. Why do you ask? And you're going to tell them a story about how you've done that in the past and it was very effective. Okay, now it may not be something that's on their job description, but it's a way to, you know, demonstrate your expertise in a way that they may not have thought about. Okay, so those are what about questions. But here we're talking about getting prepared. You want to have your 10 questions prepared in priority order. And your goal is to get 5 of those questions asked during the conversation part of the interview. And at the end, they'll usually say, do you have any more questions for me? And then you'll have 5 others to choose from. Now, you don't have to get through all 10. They're prioritized. And the answers may come up to some of your questions during the course of the interview, so you don't need to ask them. But as part of being prepared, bring a list of questions that you'd like to ask, things you'd like to know about. And certainly one of the first questions is going to be, you know, I've done this research on your job description, but what are the most important characteristics from your perspective? You're going to ask the interviewer for this position. Now, it's going to be very helpful, and still preparing for the interview, it's going to be very helpful to know your value in the work environment. So that's kind of a Clifton Strengths thing. You know, what are your natural talents? What do you do without much effort? You know, what are your skills? Natural skills is a way to think about it. Or you can use the St. Andrews group that meets on Monday evening. Well, now they're virtual, but they used to meet on Monday evenings. Provides and has coaches that work with the Career Direct evaluation. And that's a very comprehensive evaluation of your proclivity to do different, work in different industries and do different things. So I did mine, and it said, you know, number 1 would be a teaching or engineering career. Well, guess what? I was an engineer, so I think they're very accurate. And that'll help you, you know, mainly this helped, when I did it, mainly what it helped me with is to have a voice, okay? So people said, what are your strengths? You know, it's not, I'm not bragging. I'm saying, well, you know, I took this assessment and the results were, you know, I thought they were very accurate. So here's what the results were. And now you have a voice to answer this question and to explain why you'd be really good at this job. It's because it's one of your natural strengths. Okay, let's move on to part 2 of the topics, getting a good start. So you've done some preparation, and next week we'll talk about, and next 2 weeks actually, we'll talk about preparing generally and preparing for a specific job or opportunity, and even more detail than this. So show up again next Wednesday and the Wednesday following. Okay, I recommend, there's a greeting. So you think about the start of an interview, and you walk in the room, you walk in the building, and you say, "Hi, I'm Mark McDonald." I recommend that your greeting be a statement of enthusiasm. So it's the first thing that comes out of your mouth. And when you meet the receptionist, you can say, "I'm glad to be here. I think I have a lot to contribute." And something generic. You don't have to be specific. The receptionist might greet 20 candidates in a day, but you want to express your enthusiasm. So if someone asks the receptionist, they'll say, "Yeah, he seemed pretty eager, enthusiastic, excited. I remember him." So express your interest right up front. And when you meet one of your interviewers, you want to give 2 specific reasons why this job excites you, why this opportunity is just for you. Somebody just asked if the slides will be shared, and yes, they will. We'll post them up at the end of the meeting. And so you don't want to say something generic, like, "I'm really excited to be here. I could use a job. I've been out of work for 6 months." You don't want to say that. You want to be very specific. Why does this role excite you? "I'm a project manager that focuses on agile implementations and non-software development." So, and you need some of that. And I love to do it. So 2 specific reasons. And this is going to come back at the end of the interview as well. The statement of enthusiasm. And this greeting part is focused on the job. So it's not, you'll get a chance in a couple of minutes as the interview goes on to explain why you might be interested in the company and why you might be interested in that role. But in the greeting part, I recommend you focus on the job, why you're interested in that job. Now, this is a question, just a little bit more, that I never ask. I never asked when I interviewed people, why are you interested in this job? Why are you here? My approach was I'd ask them a bunch of questions, they'd give the answers, and then I'd take the totality of the interview to make my assessment. Which candidates were really interested in coming to work here and which candidates weren't. And but I think you should so it's a question that may not be asked. You should just offer the answer right up front. That's my perspective on it. Yeah, we'll come back to that, Cheryl. Okay, so I just crossed off, offer and ask for business cards. We're not going to be able to do that for a while, but it's a good idea as best you can to find out who you're going to be talking to and how to contact them. And you may, get that from the recruiter. You may ask them as well. It's less likely that during the interview or towards the end of the interview that you're going to get it, but you can certainly ask. Okay, so have your notes and questions handy. And in this video world, I would voice that. Okay, so you'd say, "I've got some," and let me look at this next one. Yeah, bring some work product. Okay, bring some work product. I'll talk about that in a second. But when you come in, you say, "I'd like to take some notes. Is that all right?" And then say, "I have here on my desk some questions I'd like to ask, and I have some work product that I prepared for this interview." And so just let them know that it's there, that you've done your homework, okay? And then when you look down to write, see how that looks? Looks like I'm not paying attention. When you look down to write, they'll realize, and I would voice that too as well. If you're taking a note, just say, "I'm taking a note." Just a moment here. Okay, right? So that's how you handle that in a video interview. We've had pit crew candidates who didn't do that. It's amazing how distracting it is for the interviewer. It drives them to distraction sometimes. So have your notes and questions handy. Bring some work product to show off. And this can be well, I got 2 things that I would recommend. You can do a 30, 60, 90-day achievement plan. I'll talk some more about that. But it's not just it's not a plan to become acclimated. It's a plan to achieve some things, okay? And so you're going to have to be pretty specific what you're going to achieve, not how you're going to achieve it, but what you're going to achieve. But you can also do your analysis of the job description and in the T cover letter format, the T cover letter format. And so if you're not familiar with that, it's got a brief introduction, and then it's got you need and I have. So in a cover letter format, it makes it very easy to look at, they don't have to read your resume. They can just look at the T format and say, okay, well, we're looking for, and they have, right? So that's also a good way to help you focus on what's important to them and where they need help. And it's a good, you can say, I did this analysis of the job description and it looks like you need A, B, C, and D, and then seek some feedback on that to help clarify that your research was in the right place. So that's a good thing to bring. And again, like the strength finders or Clifton Strengths, having work product, let's say it's not a 30, 60, 90-day plan or a T cover letter analysis of the job description, is really something that you did and something that's not confidential, and something that is relevant. So we had, for instance, a product manager come through, and she had done a lot of data sheets for components. And so she brought in some of her older ones, right? So they weren't, but they're public documents anyway. And so, bringing work product gives you a voice, gives you an opportunity to talk about some things that you're really proud of. And if it's relevant, it's going to be a big hit, I think. Okay, you want to be prepared from the first question for the interviewer. We'll cover that in the next slide. And then you're going to want to ask your first questions. And so let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about those two. Almost all interviewers will lead with the tell me about yourself question. Please tell me about yourself. Sometimes I'll ask, what brings us together today? Sometimes interviewers will ask, let's go over your resume. And so, yeah, you want to go over your resume, but you're going to make an opening statement first. And this is about 70 to 80% of the time. Mina Brown, did some research, and that's where I got the 70% number from. I recently heard it can be as high as 80%. And if you go online, if you go on Google and search for interview questions for project managers, interview questions for software engineers, interview questions for business analysts, interview questions for salespeople, just put in anything you want. About 70% of the time, the first question is going to be, tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. So what they're asking you to do is to make an opening statement. And some people consider this a trick question because they don't want to hear where you were born, where you grew up, how many brothers and sisters you have, what sports you played in high school. You need to start with your professional training. First of all, it's only going to be 2 minutes long. So here's another thing you need to work on and practice, okay? 90 seconds for answers to behavioral questions, 2 minutes max to tell your story in a very condensed fashion. But think of this as, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, right? So you start with your professional training. And that may be college, it could be military service, it could be on-the-job training. You want to include if you speak any other languages besides English, and if you've had any military service. Okay, just how you got into what you're doing now or what you're interviewing for. That's where you start. Then, and that's very brief. It's only 15 seconds. 2-3 sentences. Then you want to provide 3 achievements that are relevant to this position. So based on your research and your job description analysis, you're going to offer up 3 achievements. And this is just the result, right? You're just going to tell the result. So I saved $1 million, I recovered $1 million in cash by restructuring the forecasting using agile techniques. So there's an example I gave earlier. So that's one. And so two others that are specific to this job. You are planting seeds, literally planting seeds. Okay, if their job description is good and you've done your analysis well, they are going to be very interested in hearing the rest of the story, which the rest of the story is, how did you do that? How did you save $1 million or recover $1 million in cash using agile techniques to restructure the forecasting? How did you do that? What kind of barriers did you come up with? You know, how tough was it to make the change? How long did it take? They're going to have a bunch of questions they want to ask you, and that's perfect for you because you're going to be an expert on that story. Now, the last minute, so that takes a minute, okay? 15 seconds on your professional training, and then 45 seconds to give 3 examples, very brief. So the rest of your story has to finish up the rest of your motivation. So I called the greeting your statement of enthusiasm. But all the interviewers are going to wonder why you're motivated to come to work for them in this role and at this company. So this is what you do in the second minute. You talk about your career. You talk about how your training and your achievements and your skills, abilities, and knowledge that you are bringing with you relevant right now will make you a top performer in this role, and how you want to come to work, you know, how you like this company, a little bit about what you know about it, why you like it. It's got a visionary leader. And by the way, going to work for a company to work for a specific person that you may know or may heard about or have seen speak is a good reason. Salespeople in particular really like working for a good sales leader. And, you know, a good salesperson believes that they can sell just about anything, and I agree with them. I think a good salesperson can, once they become familiar with the product, because that's a relationship-based skill set, and they can use it anywhere. So they oftentimes are interested in working for a good leader, somebody they think is going to appreciate them, you know, and they'll learn a lot of money. But you're going to explain in the second minute, why you're motivated to come to work for that company, why now, how it fits into the arc of your career. So 3 minutes into the interview, maybe even 2.5 minutes, you've told them why you're enthused about the job, why you're interested in the company and this role, some achievements that you had, and what your, you know, basic training, professional training was. And so you're going to know all of this, okay? So just read that real quick. That's the whole story I was just telling. Why this company, why this job, why this company, why now? So that's the statement of enthusiasm plus the second minute of your introduction. And then, whoops. All right, something's missing here. Hang on. All right. At this point, I think I missed a slide here. Something's disappeared, but that's all right. So then right after you finish your opening statement, you're going to ask your first question. And that question is going to cut to the heart of the matter, is what are they looking for? What are they buying? Okay, now this is a good opportunity to also build rapport. So you're going to say something like, what are the characteristics of top performers in this role? And you want to say it that way because you want to be a top performer. Okay. You might also ask, a different way to ask it is, what are, you know, at this point, what are the most important priorities for this role? You might say, you know, I analyzed your job description and there's like 15 key priorities on the job description, but I'd like to hear from you, what are the most important at this moment? Now, I just personalized that question, okay? I'd like to hear from you. You can ask the hiring manager this. You may be interviewed by peers. You may be interviewed by subordinates, people who ultimately are going to be working for you. They may feel uncomfortable answering that question. But you're not asking them to tell you what it takes to be hired. You're asking them what they think, what they believe is important to be successful in this role. And all of them can answer that question. Now, if you get some reluctance, you can even ask them, what is important, or why do you think you have been successful in your role? Okay, you want to glean, you're trying to glean information from them about what they're buying. And you may encounter people who are reluctant to answer them. So I'm just saying, push on that. But so let's say you're talking to the hiring manager. So what are the characteristics of top performers in this role? And you want to leave this very open-ended, right? Characteristics might be skills, might be knowledge, might be a certain way about going about hard worker. But it could be very soft. It could be soft skills as well. Okay, could be a collaborative personality, empathetic. You know, they may mention these things. And so they're going to give their answer, okay? But do not be satisfied with the first answer, okay? So you're going to really, and this may be a little awkward, frankly, okay? Because you introduced yourself, they've asked you a question, tell me about yourself, you've answered, and now you're asking them questions, more than one question. So so they give their answer, what are the most important characteristics, or what are the characteristics of top performers in this role? And then you're going to say, what else? What else? Can you tell me more? I'm interested to hear if there's anything else that you would like to mention. So now, not only are you digging deeper, you know, and you're doing active listening, is you're building rapport. I mean, this will have the effect, you know, what is the interviewer going to say to that? This person really wants to know what it takes to do a good job. And it's not settling for, you know, my first off-the-cuff answer. They want more detail. They want more information. So that's your very first question. And you may find out that all that T-cover letter you did and the preparation you did was a little off kilter. Okay, they may mention things that weren't on the job description, is what I'm saying. Okay, but that's good to know right up front. Okay. If it all works out well, and there's 15 things, they may tell you the top 3 or 4. They may tell you some soft skills, but you'll know exactly what that person believes it takes to be a top performer in this role because you asked. Otherwise, it's kind of a secret, you know? They ask you questions, and in the end, they say, well, did they have what I was looking for? And you don't even know what it was. Okay, being prepared for these 2 questions. What are your salary requirements? And why did you leave your last position, or why are you considering leaving? So you need to do some research in advance on the job description and what the salary ranges are, and there's lots of good websites for that. The one I like is bls.gov, Bureau of Labor Statistics, bls.gov. And so that I like that one because it's government data that they collect from employers. So it's information provided by employers. They break it down by economic area. So Dallas-Fort Worth is an economic area. They give you, you can put in titles. So they have multiple titles, and they also give a range of pay. So they'll give you like the 10th percentile, the 50th percentile, the 70th, and the 90th, I think is the 4. So they'll give you 4 data points. You know, the idea being that a more senior person with more experience is at the high end, and a new person to that role would be at the low end, or new college grad, but it'll give you an idea of what the range is. and in that economic area for that job title. Oh, and the other thing that gives you is it gives you the total number of jobs in that economic area with that title. So it'll tell you how popular it is. Basically, if a project manager, there might be a huge number in the Dallas-Fort Worth area because that's a pretty broad project. But it'll let you know how many. So it'll how many, and so that's the number that the range is based upon. Okay, so the bigger the number, the more data is behind it. So look that up, and then now I got this from Jay Fusaro, and so when you hear him speak, he'll talk about this. I favor just answering that question. Okay, now you want to find out what their budget is for sure, and there are other people believe that early in the conversation it's not a good time to have that conversation. So about salary, so you should try to push it off and maybe use some humor to do that. So think about that and how you want to answer that question. You make the choice that you think is going to work for you. My recommendation, though, is if you're unemployed, you should know what the range is and therefore implicitly accept the range that's available in the data. Okay. So, and you can tell them, for the responsibilities of this position, I would expect to make between X and Y. And I would take the range that you find on BLS.gov and amplify it a little bit, widen it a little bit if it's early in the conversation. As you go through the interview process, in a second or third round, asking that question is a buying question. They're interested in how much it's going to take to get you. They're kind of might be interested in hiring you, and they want to know if there's a good match. So you can start to tighten it up as time goes on, and you learn more about what they need and what you have and what their culture is like. Maybe you won't know their benefits until the very end, likely. If they're proud of their benefits, they might crow about it a bit in some of their marketing literature or their recruiting literature, but you won't know exactly what their benefits are and how much they cost until you get very close to the end. But you can use this statement any time to kind of reset the discussion, right? So for the responsibilities of this position, as I now understand them, after 3-4 rounds of interviews, I would expect. And so now you're going to start narrowing down the range around the high end, around the low end. And by the way, there's good reasons to accept less than market. If they have a lot of fringe benefits, if you work, 4 days a week, 10-hour days or something like that, and get a 3-day weekend and really get that, you might accept a less than market rate for those benefits if they're important to you. So you're going to mention your range, and then you're going to ask them, does that fit in your budget? And they're going to say yes or no. They're going to tell you what their budget is, or they're going to just affirm or not affirm that you've hit the right range. But if you're a little high, that's no reason to discount yourself at that moment. If you say, my range is between 70 and 90K, and they say, well, we were thinking more like 60 to 80, you can just say, that's fine. Let's continue the process. What you're really trying to get to is an offer. Okay, so I don't think you should decline up front if this is early in the process because there's not a mismatch. If they want to keep going, then you should keep going as well, because you may find out as you get closer to the end of the process that there really are reasons why you would accept 60 to 80K. Now, of course, I'm assuming you know what you need to meet your budget, and that'll work out for you. No need to pursue a job that's going to pay you less than you need to live, and find out early the better, right? So you don't waste time. But assuming that's met, don't get yourself kicked out on a simple misunderstanding of what the value of you are and what the value of the job is. So for the responsibilities of the position, I would expect. And get a chance to listen to Jay Fusaro. He covers this in some detail. Now, the other key question is, why did you leave your last position? And thanks for asking. I learned a lot and I contributed a lot. So that's a key phrase. This is also from Jay Fusaro. I learned a lot and I contributed a lot at my previous company, and then give a very brief comment about the reason you left. Okay, it might have been a RIF, an office closing, an office relocation. You know, I left customer service so I could be in a direct sales role, you know, a change in career or a move up in career. Very brief. And then I would transition with a story, the offer of a story in reverse. Okay, so here's a rat. So I would say, let's go back to I learned a lot and I contributed a lot. You know, you might say my most, the thing I'm most proud of that I achieved at ABC Corp was, and then mention the achievement. Would you like to hear more about it? Or you can just say, would you like to hear about a time where or would you like to hear how I learned SAP, you know, inventory management while I was there? You just mention something that you achieved or learned during that time, because that's really what's important. It's not important so much the nature of why you left. A lot of people, because of COVID, are out of work. A lot of people, there have been a lot of layoffs since 2008. I mean, a lot of people have been laid off. A lot of very good people have lost jobs from corporate restructurings and outsourcing. I mean, most hiring managers will recognize this. So it's not important so much the details of why you got laid off. What is important, though, is your attitude about it. Okay, if you've been damaged, emotionally damaged by what's happened to you, you know, that's a problem they don't want to inherit. So go right into something you achieved while you were there. Okay, that's what's important. What you learned during that time period that they might benefit from, that's what you want to focus on. So get very brief. I learned a lot and I contributed a lot. We had a RIF, an office relocation. And, but can I tell you about a time where I did something great? Now here's a trick question. I like this question. Would you go back to work for your previous employer? Now most people would answer this question, yes. I mean, they want to demonstrate their loyalty. You know, they said they learned a lot and contributed a lot. They want to show that they're not, you know, pissed off at their previous employer, that they hold no ill will towards them. But really, that's not what the hiring manager wants to hear. What the hiring manager wants to hear is, no, I'm not going back, I'm going forward. And going forward means working for you and doing what you need me to do, because I'm really good at it. So it's a trick question. But think like this. You need to think like this. I am moving forward. You know, what happened in the past is in the past. I did learn a lot. I did achieve a lot. I'm proud to talk about those achievements in the context of working for you. Okay, so all that makes sense. Somebody's off to do an interview. Good for them. Okay, avoid crashing. So this is the third section. And let's just talk a little bit about some of the things that may come up. Panel interviews. Panel interviews are a little more difficult. Panel interviews are difficult because it's hard to build rapport with 3 people at once. As a matter of fact, I don't recommend trying. I do recommend, though, that you take a few notes every time a panel interviewer answers a question and see if you can figure out what they do. If you don't already know, see if you can figure out their perspective. It might be from operations, it might be from sales, it might be from product development, it might be from customer service. So if you can start to figure out where they're coming from, then you have the ability now to ask questions to specific interviewers. But otherwise, you're just going to be asking questions kind of in a general sense. Like, so what are the most important characteristics of this position? And not, from your perspective, it's not a personalized question. Panel interviews are also tough because it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 on one, right? So they can hit you rapid fire with question after question after question. And it's hard to, you need to work the room. You need to be looking at everybody who's in the panel interview, and that includes if it's a video interview, which is kind of tough to do because you're really just interacting with the camera. But if you can't see them all at once, you can't see all of their reactions simultaneously. So it's really hard if you were face to face to read their body language. So, but you're going to listen for who responds to, seems to, react to what you have to say, and that'll give you some insight in what their background is. Disagreeable or argumentative interviewers. So I have this document that I'm going to post up at the end, how to answer the 64 toughest interview questions, and it covers some of these situations. My advice here is just don't take the bait, okay? But also be aware enough that if they ask a challenging question, that you understand the motive for the question, okay, and answer the motive. So don't you think you're overqualified? Or wouldn't you agree with me that you're overqualified? Okay, well, being overqualified is not a bad thing. You definitely have enough qualifications, okay, to do the work. But the question is, will you be motivated to do the work? Will you leave as soon as something more suitable to your background shows up? Will you fit in with our culture? Will the other employees accept you if you're 20 years older than them but doing the same job? Will they consider that a threat? So those are all the motivations for the questions. And so you can answer that kind of leading question, challenging interview question by talking about your motivation, your achievements to some extent, and how you're committed, to this company. So and if you have done a good job in your introduction, you've already explained to them why you're interested in the job and why the company is attractive to you, and you may need to repeat that. Okay, but those are good reasons to be a highly experienced person and accepting what looks like a lower level position. A really friendly interviewer. I have a great story here. Amazon. I don't know if Amazon's the only one that does this, but last few weeks ago, we had a candidate who was going through the process at Amazon. They have a very structured process: first round, second round, third round. And so I think round 1.5. So he had a conversation with them, and now he was having another follow-up interview by an HR person. And they started what he thought was a conversation. They just started talking. And after a few minutes, he realized that she was embedding questions into the conversation that she was expecting him to answer. And he realized that 2 of those questions had gone by and he hadn't addressed them. I thought this was perfect. This is a really friendly interviewer, and I think they're mostly HR people, frankly. And so you'll be thinking you're having a great conversation, and they've snuck these questions in that they want you to answer. And if you don't answer them, you don't answer them. They don't know the answer, So you are always being interviewed, okay? The chatty interview, okay, so this might be not a very effective interviewer, right? They are nervous, perhaps, they want to talk, okay? And it may be a little bit of work, but this is where you go back to your study and your analysis and use a RATS, okay? And so once you get a chance to break in, you say, I saw in your job description that you need help with, whatever it is. I have a great story about how I did that in my old job. Would you like to hear it? Okay, now that's your first attempt. Your second attempt, if they don't take the bait, is you just start telling the story. Say, yeah, that reminds me. On your job description, you're looking for X, Y, and Z, and I can help you do that. Let me tell you, here's how I did it. Okay, so in the end, if they monopolize the conversation, they are still going to be asked to give an assessment of your suitability. And what are they going to base that on if you never got a chance to talk? It's likely not to be very good. I don't know if they can do the job. I didn't hear anything. They're not going to tell their boss that they monopolized the conversation. Same way with a distracted interview. Sometimes it happens more than you probably realize that they're distracted or unprepared. Okay, so they may have been recruited at the last minute to replace somebody else who was supposed to be on the interview team and wasn't able to make it because they were distracted with something going on in the business. Okay, so they may not have done any preparation for you at all. And so when you ask right up front what they think are the most important characteristics of performers in this role, they may tell you, I don't know. I mean, I just got this resume 10 minutes ago and I'm supposed to spend 30 minutes with you. So there you go. Here's another interviewer who, even though they're unprepared, they're going to have to provide an assessment of your candidacy. And so both of these you handle in a similar way. It's not going to be as difficult to get your words in, but you can say, well, you're in your mind, I can make this easy for you. You need, and I have, okay, this is your T cover level analysis. You need these things from your job description, and I have this experience and these achievements that match up. And you can make it really easy for these distracted or unprepared interviewers to come away with a positive perspective on your candidacy. Same way with the uninformed. Those are kind of all just variations of the same theme. The silent treatment, especially after you've been asked a difficult question or a negative-oriented question. This is a strategy that some panelists use, so just be prepared for it. Some interviewers use. They'll just go silent. Say, tell me about a time. What was your most difficult, or what was your biggest mistake? Tell me about a time when you failed. And so you're going to say something, and then it's going to be crickets. So they're just waiting you out to see if you will go extemporaneous on them and start to ad lib. But don't take that bait. Wait an appropriate pause, and then you can say, did I answer your question? And if it continues, then you can offer to tell them a story in reverse, right? So would you like to hear about a time where I did X, Y, and Z? I achieved a great result, and how I did that. So now you're gonna, trying to get the conversation back on track. And then for some of you, you're gonna get a very technical question, and maybe some of you, some of these are sometimes hilarious, like how many jelly beans can you put in a 747? But the very technical question is not really a question they want an answer to. I call it the impossibly difficult question. What they want to do is they want to gain insight into how you approach solving new problems. A lot of jobs, you don't ever do the same thing twice. Every day, every week, every project is something that's never been done before. And they're curious about how you tackle that, how you approach that. And it'll say a lot about how your personality and how you solve problems. Some people are going to say, well, I know a buddy. I've got a buddy. You probably know some of these people. They always have a buddy. They have someone they know they can call and ask. Now, I always considered that opinion research. I didn't put a lot of value on it, but you'll meet people whose go-to is to call somebody up they knew in college or their friend. Others will go, I'm going to go do some research, right? I'll go on the internet or, but it'll say a lot about how you solve new problems. And that's what they want to know, because there's no right or wrong answer. It's just how do you approach it. You might break down some of the questions that you would have to help solve that problem. Okay, how would you go about it? Well, what kind of jelly beans are they? How big is a 747? What model? You could go into some depth and have some fun with those. If you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Questions. All right, let's keep going. Okay, let's talk about avoiding crashing and frequent areas for improvement that we see at the pit crew. And some of these are just ineffective things that people do, okay? And so they get coaching about how to make them more effective. And I mentioned star stories early in the process. Star stories are very powerful if done well, okay? But there's lots of ways to not do them well, okay? And one of them is taking up too much time, okay? And oftentimes that's because people don't know the answer. They don't have an answer at hand, so they kind of start talking while they think about the answer, and that's just not an effective approach. Now, on some people on purpose, like I said, a common misconception is that giving a comprehensive answer will make you look good, make you look like an expert, but that's completely not true, okay? Giving a very brief and to the point answer builds your credibility. So don't spend too much time on the situation or the action part. You want to get to that result within 90 seconds. So the situation is very brief. If they want to know more about the situation, they'll ask about it. But so they can find it on your resume if they're familiar with where you were working, what your title was, and if you had one title for 5 years, you might want to say it was my third year there, or how much time you'd been there, right? So they can kind of put that in context. Then you're going to very briefly describe the task. And most people don't have trouble with this. The tasks are pretty straightforward. We were a team. We were tasked to do whatever you were to do. Then the action, and then the result. And some people will spend so much time on the situation and the action that they forget to tell the result. Okay, but it happens more times than you'd believe possible. So if your action is complicated, and sometimes it is, just break it down, okay, and say, to achieve the result that I'm about to tell you, I did 5 things. I'm going to share with you right now the first 2, the most important 2. And then, so you're going to say those 2, and then you're going to tell them the result. Now, if you've hit upon something that they're really interested, they're going to ask, well, what were the other 3? Okay, so you'll get some more time. If they're not, if this turns out to be, not exactly what they were looking for, then you just, used up 90 seconds, maybe you missed, but you still told a good result. So don't think that, that was a bad story. It was a good story. It's just not right on target. So they'll ask a different question, right? They may rephrase the question, or they may just move on. But you don't want to spend 5 minutes answering a question where you've missed the target. So just take your 90 seconds, break it down. If they're interested, they'll ask for more information. Okay, same way with your results that you did in your opening statement. They're going to come back and ask about those if you've hit the mark. And if you haven't, they probably won't, okay? But you're going to ask that question right afterwards. You're going to find out what's important to them, and then that's what you're going to talk about. And those are the stories you're going to offer. Now, I just mentioned this one already. A lot of people will talk while they're thinking. That's not effective either. If you get a silent pause after your 90-second answer to the star story, don't feel compelled to add additional information. That's a complete story. Just ask them, did I answer your question? And like I said, the same way with challenging interviewers who might use this strategy. If the pause goes on longer, you can offer to tell them another story. You're in control to some extent, to a great extent, of the assessment that they give you, but by how you answer these questions, how direct they are, how brief they are, how right on point they are. And it's not a bad interview, if at the end, you're not the right person for the job. You're going to be confident enough to tell your story well. They're going to assess whether that story matches up with what they need, and it may not be a good match. It may just not be. So, but don't feel bad. You did what you needed to do and you did it well. They need somebody else. Now, another thing people do with star stories is they've heard there's no I in team. But the hiring manager is not hiring a team. The hiring manager is hiring you. So they need to hear what you did, what your part was. So if you don't like using I did this, I did that, you can say my part was, or my responsibility was, or my role was. So people come to the pit crew and they use a lot of we. That does not help us assess if you're the right person for the job, because we don't know what you did. So that's a big area for improvement in answering your star stories. Some people will answer a star story with words that came out of a textbook. Now, they may believe they're answering the question well, but it sounds like they just read it. It sounds like they may not have done it. It sounds like they may know how to do it, but they may have never actually done it. So when you tell your stories, you need to include some specifics that only you would know because you did it. It's your story, it's your situation. Now you can go overboard with this. So not all details are as important as others, but some specifics are necessary to build credibility. Mention metrics, dollars are best, transactions are good, numbers, percentages kind of third, and then value is the fourth most effective. So value, things were better after we did this project. Okay, that's a value statement. Saying I recovered $1 million in cash by restructuring the forecasting process, that's a powerful metric. And so you need to have a metric for your results, okay? Some people struggle with this, but transactions, any time-bound event, and you can put it into context as well. You say based on my commitment, we did this, me and my team of 3, did this project in 2 months. The average for this type of project was 4 months. We worked really hard because I'm a dedicated and committed employee. And the company did whatever they did. They kept the customer, they bagged the deal before the end of the quarter as a result, right? That was the result. So that's a time-bound achievement. You did something faster than the normal, worked harder than average. Attention to detail can be another one. Talk in specifics. Fumbling a negative-oriented question. So that's another, let's talk about these in general. So you may be asked a time when you made a mistake, okay, or you failed to do something, or your weakness, okay. So these kinds of questions are less about what you did, how you failed, and more about what you learned from that situation. So you need to rephrase that question in your mind as a greatest learning experience. Okay, what was a great learning experience? And so that's what we want to talk about, is what you learned. If they've asked you a time that you failed, it's best to pick something, farther back in time, but something that you learned such a great lesson, you've used it ever since for great success. That's a good answer to that question. Now, some people, you want to avoid having to say no, okay? So a negative oriented question might end up being, do you have experience with X, Y, and Z? And you don't have any experience with X, Y, and Z. So you're going to answer the question with what you know about X, Y, and Z. And if it's on the job description, you need to do a little hurry up research. So and you may know, I've done some reading about X, Y, and Z, and I look forward to learning more about it. Or I've done some reading on X, Y, and Z, and it's interesting to me that, so make a comment, and I'm interested in learning more, but don't just say, no, I don't know anything about X, Y, and Z, okay? Speaking negatively in an offhand way. So this is as a catches some people, okay? So they'll make some comment that they believe is, what would I say, non-confrontational, but it just leaves a doubt in the interviewer's mind. So I had a candidate one time who said, why'd you leave your last job? And so they gave the answer, and they said that was a crazy place to work. Now, I was sitting there wondering, okay, who was crazy here? Was it him? Was it his boss? Was that crazy good or crazy bad? I mean, what does that mean? So that's kind of an offhand comment, throwaway comment maybe, but you don't want to have any hint of negativity about previous bosses, coworkers, or companies. So that catches some people. All right. In a panel interview, you need to focus on all the interviewers. Okay, you need to work the room, and this happens often. And people focus just on the person who answered the question, and don't want to do that. Okay, finishing strong. So now this is the last part of the agenda, and then I got a couple of extra topics to cover, and I'm going to pick up a little speed so we have some time for questions at the end. If you have any of your 10 questions that you prepared in advance, they're going to ask you almost always, do you have any questions for us? So pick a couple that are left. Do not say, no, I don't have any questions. We've covered them all. Ask some questions. Show off your work product. If you haven't already brought out your work product, show it off. You can just say, well, I have this 30, 60, 90-day plan. Would you like to see it? And that's an achievement plan, as I mentioned. It's not an acclamation plan. Here's what I plan to achieve in the next 30, 60, 90 days. That's the what. It's not the how. If they want to know how, they're going to have to hire you. Okay? But make a plan. You can share that. And you can always have your T cover and letter and analysis, which you've shown that you have at the beginning, mentioned that you have at the beginning. Find out what the next steps are. You want to know what the next steps in the process are. They're hiring, are they interviewing more candidates? When do they expect to make a decision? Suggest a follow-up call in a few days. Now you definitely want to get the information, the person, and the phone number of who you should contact if you have questions. Okay. So one way to do that is to say, well, I'm probably going to have additional questions. Could I call in 3 or 4 days? Could I call on Tuesday morning? And who would I call if I have additional questions? Okay, so try to get both if you can. Schedule for the call and who you're going to call, and then make that call. Ask for feedback. This is controversial, I would say, because some people think that asking for feedback might leave a negative impression with the interviewer, especially if they have to give you some negative feedback. Okay, but so there's a art, let's say, to asking this question. And so do some research on this, and we have an asking questions session. We cover this as well in more detail. But you might say something like, is there anything that we discussed today that would cause you to hesitate in recommending me for this role? Now, a more positive thing to say is, how do you see me fitting in? So now you're not asking for specific negative things, but you're asking them to comment on how you see them fitting in. You might ask, how do I compare to the, what's the word I want to use? Ideal candidate. How do I compare to the ideal candidate? Okay, you don't want to ask to be compared to the other candidates because they may not have interviewed them all, and they're not going to compare and contrast you to somebody who really exists, but they may have an idea of the top 3 or 4 things that are going to be essential, and they may give you some feedback on what you're missing. Now you want to do this because this is your last opportunity to counter any negative impression they have. And they may say, I was hoping we'd have a little more time to talk about X, Y, and Z. And so now just take a few moments to address that, okay? So you know what it was that they didn't get to. Use some of this time. But they might say, well, I thought you might have more experience with something, right? So you're going to get a chance to, if you haven't explained, and you can say, well, I may have made a mistake, and I don't think and I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think I covered it as well as I could have, and then, give them additional information that you may have left out. So asking for feedback is very important. Okay, now you're going to close. Okay, you're going to ask for the job, and a good way to do this is to come back to what they need help with, what you offered when you arrived, those 3 achievements, but what you figured out during the course of the interview that they need additional help with, that you have a background in. You have a way to help them. So you're going to come back to this. You're going to basically cover, and very briefly, what came up in the interview, the ways you can help them, and then ask to be advanced to the next step. Would you support my candidacy to go on to the next step? Based on this review I just did of all the ways I can help you. If you're talking to the decision maker, you can ask for the job. And you can do this in a funny way or a very serious way. Where is my office going to be? Is that corner office with the window? Is that going to be mine? One of the good things about being out of work is I can start on Monday, and I'd like to do that. So send your thank you notes after the interview is over, and I recommend that you handwrite them and that you scan them or take a photograph of them and email them, and also send them in regular mail. Now, the ones you send in regular mail, you don't know if they're ever really going to get there. And they won't be delivered for several days for sure. But writing a handwritten note that is unique to each interviewer that you interviewed with, and comments on something that came up in the interview, gives them a compliment perhaps on something that you discussed, and then photographing it or scanning it and sending it to them is an effective way. So an effective way to personalize. It's not, a typewritten email thank you note. It's a handwritten email thank you note. And if you've arranged for follow-up calls, make those follow-up calls. If you've got a phone number for someone to contact, contact them and keep up with your candidacy. And there's a whole science or art about how frequently to do that, which we won't talk about today, but be professionally persistent. Okay, here's start to finish. Here's what we talked about. Prepare for the interview. Open with your statement, or greet with your statement of enthusiasm. Open with your tell me about yourself. Start the conversation by asking that first question right after your opening statement. Have your star stories ready to go, the achievements that match to what they need, plus answers to your salary expectations and why you left your last position. Brevity is better, especially on phone interviews. But if you can answer a question in 60 seconds, just answer the question. So I didn't mention direct versus indirect questions. So, star stories are good for answers that require a story, but sometimes you'll just be asked a direct question. And so, give a brief, direct answer. Can be 15, 20 seconds. Not every answer requires a story. Show off your work product. Ask questions at the end about the next steps. Ask for feedback. Be enthusiastic and be asked to advance to the next step or ask for the job. So that's A to Z. All right, I have used up all my time, but let's do this. And these slides are available. Somebody asked about that. I tried to make these slides so they're readable, so there's a lot of text on them. So we're going to go ahead and make them available to you. But you set yourself apart by showing enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is very important to in the final selection for sure, okay? But also in advancing from step to step. You know, the candidates that demonstrate the most enthusiasm, you know, get the hiring managers, you know, excited that they could be, you know, they would enjoy working there and would be effective working there. And so their candidacy does better than people who aren't good at showing enthusiasm. So you can do that by saying it in your statement of enthusiasm. You can use positive and affirming statements during the interview. So when they ask you a question, you might say something like, wow, you know, I've got a lot of examples of that. So yeah, here's a good one. Okay, so that's a positive and affirming statement that you've got a lot of stories to tell. You know, bring your work product, get a conversation going, and don't let it go. Like I mentioned, you know, a good way to show enthusiasm and to build rapport is for that first question, which is very important to your success. You just don't settle for the first answer. You try to dig for more information. And of course, asking for the job is a true differentiator. Most candidates won't ask for the job. They won't put a close into the interview at all. And so that helps show enthusiasm. Pausing to frame your answer. So that somebody in the, when I asked at the beginning, said, you know, give a quick answer. Well, give a quick answer if you've got the answer. If you need, if the question's complicated or you need some time to frame your answer, or sometimes they'll ask a two-part question or a three-part question, it's okay to pause. It's okay, and as a matter of fact, it's preferred, okay? If you just start wandering, randomly talking, well, it's not going to be random, but if you just start talking with no direction while you're thinking, that does not impress anybody, okay? But pausing to consider your answer and then delivering a brief and to the point answer is very effective. For direct questions, answer, you know, give the answer and then provide an example if you have an example. That's a very positive way to also to separate yourself from the pack. So the answer is X, and for example, and then give an example how you might have done that in your work experience. Also, if it's a complicated topic, if you're not sure, so for instance, you might be, in my case, an engineer, you might be talking to a salesperson, you're not sure they're going to understand if you go into engineer lingo. Okay, so you can say, and that means, okay? So that's an example. Another example is in Strength Finders, they have this, so I'm a strategic, okay? That's one of my top strengths. So what does that mean? I've wondered all my life what strategic means. But in Strength Finders, that means you see opportunities that other people are unable to see. That's the way they define strategic. So you can say, you know, one of my strengths is strategic, and that means, and use those words. Woo is another one, winning over others. So strength is woo. What does that mean? So connect the dots. Be curious. When you ask these questions, you can add, I'm curious to know, I'm interested to find out. Be curious. Express your curiosity. And seek to build rapport. We mentioned this as we went along. You can personalize your questions to the interviewer. Give them an opportunity to talk about themselves. If you have time. Now, this is, building rapport takes time. So if you've got a 45-minute interview, you probably don't want to spend a lot of time building rapport. If you've got an hour or an hour and a half, yeah, go for it. And as a matter of fact, they might expect it if they have that much time for the interviews, they might expect you to build rapport with the interviewer. So ask questions, engage in discussions, offer your perspective, ask what about questions, lots of different ways to build rapport if you have time. All right, Jeff told me I need to finish up. I got 5 extra minutes. You'll see what's in here. I'm just going to flip through these, and you guys can get them when I offer them up. Bonus material, 4 questions from Jay Fusaro. We've covered all 4 of them. Here's some questions you might hear about. here's some comments on how to build achievements. And these are all things I wasn't planning on covering, so we'll just review them right quick. All right, do we have any burning questions we have to answer? Jeff?
Let me unmute myself. Let's see here. You made a comment about detail-oriented when covering avoid crashing. What do you mean by detail-oriented?
Detail, or attention to detail, right? So attention to detail, it can be one of the things. So I have a good example, frankly, from my own experience. When I started work at DSC, I'd been there about 6 months. I was a systems engineer. And so we were looking at modifying an existing product to be deployed internationally. So I was reviewing how to do that. And I took the initiative, not only did I read the specifications, but I took the initiative to request and review the schematics, okay, because there are some connections that extra connections we were going to need to make a European product. And I was wondering, what the backplane looked like and here's what I discovered. I discovered that about 24 connections per backplane were missing. Okay, it was in the spec, but it wasn't on the schematic. Well, that was a surprise. That was a surprise that those connections were missing, and DSC was about to release this new backplane and put it into production to the tune of 1,000 backplanes a month. Okay, so I was like a hero because I discovered this attention to detail.
Okay. The other question was that I saw here, is the 30, 60, 90-day plan recommended despite the type of position that someone's interviewing for? So I don't think it's necessary for anybody, but it could be a good tool if you're in sales or management. I don't know, other comments you have on that?
Yeah, I didn't quite catch the question.
Is the 30, 60, 90-day plan recommended despite the type of position that someone could be interviewing for?
Well, yeah, no, I don't think all positions require a 30, 60, 90-day plan. But it is a good work product to produce. It made you think about what you would achieve if you were to be hired, right? So it shows the effort you put in to understand how you could contribute. So I guess the way to say that is all jobs don't require one, but all new positions could have one, right? It's not something that you're going to find, well, I guess unless it's an hourly paid job where you work on a assembly line or something, there is no 30, 60, 90-day plan. But otherwise, if it's more of a professional level, white collar job, then it applies.
Right. All right. Well, Mark, thank you very much. I know you're going to post a few files that people can download. So watch the chat box. Mark will be posting, I think, 4 different files that you can download. If you don't happen to get them, you can always send an email to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com for those people who are watching on Facebook. If you just want to send an email to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com and tell Mark that you'd like to get those 4 documents, he'll be glad to email those documents to you. Just a reminder, we've got other programming coming up this week. I know somebody else earlier in the chat said, where can we sign up for other things? There's nothing to sign up for. You can just join us for these things that are coming up here. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, from 1 to 2 o'clock, we'll be talking about effective resumes. This Friday from 9:30 to 11:30. If you'd like to know what's going on in the city of Richardson, John Jacobs, the head of the Economic Development Board for the city of Richardson, will be with us, and he'll know everything that knows about what's going on in the city of Richardson. And then next Tuesday, our LinkedIn presentation will be with Ruth Lipsky. You can follow us on Zoom. You can follow us on Facebook. Please just check the Career DFW calendar if you want to get the Zoom links. Or like I said, if you're on Facebook, you'll be able to watch us live every day at 1 o'clock and then Friday at 9:30. Starting next Friday, so starting August, September, and October, we will cover the following 13 titles. So next week, preparing to be interviewed and how employment recruiting works. So that'll be our topic next week. That'll be with Walt Glass and Mark McDonald. They'll both be talking about those topics. And we'll be heading through all these topics over the next 13 weeks. These sessions have been recorded, will be recorded. All the past sessions for interviewing have been recorded. They're all on the Career DFW Facebook page. You can go back and watch them. They're on the Career USA YouTube channel. I know somebody talked about where can I find something about video interviewing or interviewing on Zoom. I posted that link to the person on the Career USA YouTube channel where you can find that information out. And here's what the YouTube channel happens to look like. Just click on playlist, and then underneath that where you see that green arrow, you can click on view full playlist, and you'll see the first 13 sessions we've done, the 3 sessions we've had in between, and all the titles are there, so you can go back if you need to catch up on something very quickly. So please remember, Career DFW is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of our speakers, including myself, we're all volunteers. We're all here to help you land your next great opportunity. We have no full-time, no part-time employees. We survive on donations. So please consider when you get your next great opportunity, please consider making a donation so we can continue doing what we're doing. And if your company happens to offer matching donations, please look us up on the list. If you don't see us, please contact me. That way we can, that way your donation would double in value. We really would appreciate it. So thank you very much for joining us. Mark has posted those 4 documents in the chat box, so please be sure to download those. I will leave this up and running for a couple more minutes so you can get those things downloaded. But Mark, once again, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you later in the week.
Friday, for sure.